Hello, I'm Joy Macknight, Deputy Editor at The Banker, and I'm joined by Economics Editor Silvia Pavoni to talk about the hot topics at the Felaban conference, which draws together senior bankers from across Latin America. It's hosted from the 11th to the 14th of November in the Dominican Republic. Silvia, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Joy.
Obviously, the November issue covers a lot of LATAM subjects, and we're doing a special report on the Dominican Republic, the host nation. What were some of the things that came out of that report?
So the Dominican Republic continues to be a bit of a bright spot in economic terms within a region that hasn't really performed particularly well in recent times. In fact, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund's projections for this year are around 6.4% of GDP growth, which is the largest across the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean. And of note is also the efforts by the current governments in the Dominican Republic to beef up their anti-money laundering legislation. They've widened the net to include other crimes, for example, tax evasion. And this is also on the back of corruption scandals that erupted in the Dominican Republic, on the back of the much wider Odebrecht scandal that originated in Brazil under the now very much famous Lava Jato car wash operation.
Maybe on the other end of the scale is Argentina, which has had some issues recently. The cover story is all about Argentina. What really has sparked off the current crisis? And is the intervention by the IMF, is that going to really help the situation?
Argentina underwent a massive currency crisis that forced the government to knock at the door of the IMF. This is a highly controversial, highly charged thing to do for a country that still has deep and bitter memories of the last time the IMF intervened in the country, which is just before the 2001 default. The government felt they had to do so because the peso slided so much that the central bank pretty much used quite a lot of their foreign currency reserves to beef up the local currency. And therefore, there started being some kind of concerns around the ability of the country to repay their international debts. So now we have the IMF largest ever bailout program, $57 billion, which is good. So investors are reassured they are going to be paid. On the other hand, though, the IMF money obviously comes with some conditions that have to do with austerity. They are in line with what the government wants to do. They want to, first and foremost, reduce their fiscal position and go from the current fiscal deficit onto a surplus. But this would mean an adjustment of around 4%, depending on how the country finishes this year in terms of their fiscal deficit. And next year is going to be an election year. Are you going to be able to introduce very tough austerity reforms in an election year while you're also trying to win again and remain in your spot as a president? We don't know.
And the November issue also has the top 200 Latin American banks ranking. What were some of the trends that you saw within that?
The Brazilian banks remain firmly at the top. We have the top 5 Brazilian names that continue to dominate our regional ranking, led by Itaú Unibanco. They've all managed to perform rather well. Their Tier 1 capital, which is the measure that we use to rank our banks, have kind of gone up or stayed stable for the top 5. Brazil is another hotspot in the region, of course, not just because it is the biggest economy, but also because this has been particularly tough from a sort of political point of view with the presidential elections, which have just ended and resulted in the win of Jair Bolsonaro, the far-right and rather controversial candidate who is going to take office next year in January. There are a bunch of question marks over his political agenda. There is one outstanding and very important reform that still has to be put through, the pensions reform. It looks like Mr. Bolsonaro will follow with the sort of orthodox economic program. The finance minister, Paulo Guedes, is known to come from a sort of the Chicago orthodoxy side of economics. The other point is the head of the central bank. Now the central bank is led by a very well-known and respected governor, Hilal Gontfein. Again, the president-elect has expressed his interest in keeping Mr. Goldfein in his position. Whether he will accept or not is a different matter, but that's certainly something to keep an eye on because, again, under his tenure, the central bank has really managed to send clear messages to the markets, something that they really appreciated, and also managed to keep interest rates under control.
Well, I have to say, thank you so much for your insights. I think it's going to be a very interesting conference. If you're attending Felaban in the Dominican Republic, please pick up your free copy of The Banker, which includes the special report on the host nation. And if not, you can read all the coverage here on thebanker.com.